Well, the latest polls seem to suggest that key demographics are turning their backs on Labor. The federal government is losing support amongst male voters and young Australians specifically, despite holding on to a 52-48 two-party preferred lead. But this lead could be under threat if Labor fails to deliver greater cost of living relief in the upcoming budget. Joining me live is Redbridge Group Director Simon Welsh. Simon, good morning to you. Thank you for your time today. What are your focus groups telling you at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Holly. Yeah, look, the cost of living pressures haven't released, and what we're seeing, I think, pretty well comports with what we're seeing in the polling, which is there was a little sort of pause in the trend off the Labor vote around the time of the stage 3 tax cuts. There was a belief in the focus groups, they've done something. This is terrific. Maybe there's more to come. What we're seeing now is the hard reality of a few more months of cost of living grind. There's no other relief on the horizon. When we talk to people now in the groups and we ask them the question, do you feel like, we're through the worst of it? Do you feel like the worst is still to come? They're telling us that they still feel like the worst is to come. There's no sense of light at the end of the tunnel. And that you can't have that kind of stress and strain in the electorate without some kind of effect on vote. And I think, so what we're seeing now is the resumption of the trend that was there towards the end of last year, which is that trend off the Labor poll. And as you said in the introduction, it's happening in some key demographics. And I think one of the interesting stories around this, which makes it a sort of a complicated story in an electoral sense, which is a lot of that decline in vote for Labor is coming off male voters particularly, but also particularly folk with vocational education. So people that you would traditionally associate with a strong Labor vote. The Labor vote is holding up reasonably well. There's a bit of softening there amongst university educated voters. So if you think about the seats that Labor picked up off the Liberals at the last election, most of those seats are very highly university educated, very diverse. Those seats are looking okay. It's more these sort of outer suburban seats. And again, we know the Liberals have got this outer suburban strategy. The problem for them there is that cohort where the vote is softest no longer really defines those electorates. Those electorates have become incredibly diverse. They have become incredibly better educated over time, or more formally educated over time. So it's not a neat transition from one pile to the other. So I think we're still looking at a political mess, but I think the trend, depending on what we see out of the budget in terms of cost of living relief, if there's no more sort of rabbits to pull out of the hat on that, I think the trend that we're looking at would certainly be concerning Labor.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the points you raised there was cost of living pressure impacting millions of Australians at the moment. People I've been speaking with on Sky News are, a lot of business owners, they're doing it tough and they, as you mentioned, don't see any relief in sight. I mean, the only possible relief could come in the form of the upcoming budget. What measures would Australians like to see in that budget?
Yeah, I think sort of two things. One is just some kind of relief, even if it is only a temporary package. I think, through last year, we've been talking about, there was sort of a suspicion around Band-Aid and temporary relief and those sorts of things. It's now at the point I think people would take whatever they can get. These people have, and they talk about this to us in the focus groups, they've eaten through their savings, they've eaten through their debt. Like, this is really starting to get hand-to-mouth stuff. So I think any sort of relief, even if it is only temporary, would be appreciated at this time. Then you've got the more systemic issues. You've got issues around wages, you've got issues around housing, where people are looking, particularly on housing, people are looking for bolder, more dramatic kind of reforms, particularly that younger cohort that you mentioned in your introduction, where there is an issue for Labor as well. That younger cohort is looking for big ticket reforms that are going to put housing back on their personal agendas, because right now you talk to young people about housing and it's a non-conversation. They don't even think about buying their own home at the moment because it just seems so otherworldly to them with the pressures that they've got and the cost of property these days.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel that if voters don't see some response here from Labor in regards to these kind of pressures that you're speaking about, cost of living or housing or whatever it may be, it may not work in Labor's advantage here. But on the flip side, how is the coalition faring in all of this?
Yeah, it's certainly not a direct translation of one to the other. And if you look at the Liberal primary, while it's gotten a bit better, it's still not enough to win an election. Based on traditional sort of number crunching, the Liberals need to have a primary north of 40 to be able to win an election in their own right. So it's all the signs at the moment, and the trend, as I say, is pointing towards next election a Labor minority government. A lot of time to go, a lot of water to go under the bridge. But if it was held right now, that's probably what you'd be looking at. And while they might be pivoting to the suburbs, they're certainly doing some things that do not help them, particularly with that university educated and particularly, but not only, the younger voter. So, talking about things like nuclear energy, talking about things like super for housing, don't help them certainly win back those seats that they lost at the last election. They seem to be betting the house on winning those outer suburban seats. But as we've seen, even in a by-election like Dunkley, as we've seen, it's hard going for the Liberals to win that kind of territory. You're talking about sort of entrenched Labor votes. And so while there is a softness in the Labor vote there, absolutely, it's not necessarily translating directly over to the Libs.
Yeah, indeed. Simon Welsh, thank you for your time and analysis today. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks, Holly.